my pleasure to be with you today and meet people who are with us from Singapore, from Lausanne, from Hong Kong, a range of countries, a range of people who like to learn more, like to discuss today more about generating business models with AI. So without further ado, let me just share a couple of slides and then launch a poll immediately. And there we are. So I said it already, this is the topic that occupies us, and I'm grateful for you carving out this hour for me this morning. So what are we going to do? Four things really. We'll talk a little bit about what generating might mean, what business models are, and how AI plays a role in this, and how we can generate new business models with AI. And throughout, please use the chat as actively as possible, because that's one way of keeping it interactive besides the polls. All right, so generating, why do I make a bullet point item out of this? I think it's important to understand what generating and what innovation might mean for all of us. And in order to do that, we need to know who's here and why we're here. So we have a little bit of the location already, but I'd like to launch a quick poll that you can fill in a split second, okay? Poll is ended and I share some results with you. So you see that we are mainly in services, followed by manufacturing, financial, and then extraction, which is reasonable. And then we are mainly in EMEA and followed by Asia, Oceania. This is really cool. And then I'm delighted that most of you are interested in both topics, business models and AI. And let me stop sharing and move on. That's great. So we now know who is here and why, and we are all interested in generating. But what does generating actually mean? And in the research sphere, there are two camps, and I think we need to address this very, very briefly. One camp says, well, innovation is always combining things that were, or combining what was, all right? I think that makes a lot of sense, but there's another field, and that is a little bit more aspirational, creating what was not. And what I try to do in my research and my work with clients here at IMD is to bring these together so that we can explore this fascinating interface where the real action happens, where we build something that wasn't there out of something that may have been around for a long while and has just been overlooked. And data could be one of those things. So there we go, business models. Business models is one of those terms that have become extremely popular because it's useful, but it's also potentially fashionable. And that always means that lots of people talk a lot of things about business models, but they may mean different things when they say this. So let's create a bit of a foundation so that we then can jump into AI and what AI can do in order to innovate business models. So dominant business model change. Well, I think we all know that since the Industrial Revolution starting in the UK, mass production was a big thing. So making things and selling them. And that was a distinctive and pervasive business model in that era. And then since the 1950s, marketing, distribution, segmenting customers and giving them exactly what they want, that has become also extremely diffused. And I have put them into boxes, which is visually a little bit deceptive. I believe that many of us are still in the business of making things and selling them. Give me a quick chat shout out. How many of you are still in the business of making things and selling them, making services and selling services included? So how many of you are doing that? Just give me a quick yes. Yes, thank you. Yes, Donald, Lori, thanks a lot. Singer, yes, Patrick, Devin, Piotr, thank you. Stan, fantastic. Okay, you see, it's not that what has been come around through the Industrial Revolution is gone just because more than 100 years have passed. So it's still there, and it goes on for many of us. Thank you all. This is great. I love this. I love the engagement. So where are we going? We are going into a world where business model change is much more diffused, and for this tools have been invented, business model templates. And one of the most popular, most widely diffused ones is the business model canvas, developed here in Switzerland, close to IMD, by Alex Osterwalder and Yves Pigneur. And the colleagues at Strategizer have diffused this widely, and it's very, very useful. It doesn't answer all the questions that we might want to answer with regards to a business model. For example, what about the synergies between activities? What about the stakeholders, other stakeholders than customers? And what about the governance arrangements with regards to security, cybersecurity, safety, cross-border governance, and so on? But tools or templates like these, they're specialized, and they're not supposed to answer all questions because they're not a theory of everything. They do a specific job very well, and this business model canvas does this very well. I've come to think of business models a little bit more simpler. I focus on four things really. One is what's being done. And the other thing is what value is created, how, and then how is that value captured? And when we go through this, that means we need to figure out for our business model what area we want to do business in. So for you who are in the car manufacturing sector, you may stick around with mobility. For those in finance, you may still focus as an area on banking or transfer. So what area do we want to be active in? And that is sometimes called arena. What area do we want to be in? And then how are we going to create value? What kind of value are we going to create is an important question that all business models have to answer this way or that way. And then how to capture money. How to capture the value, how to capture the benefits that are being generated. And I started with money, then I moved to value, and then I said benefits. And that, for you who are already thinking with me, that raises the question, why are we doing this? So for me, business models can be summarized very simply with this acronym, what value captured, why? Okay, if we know what value captured why means for us, then we have a good understanding of what we're doing. And that's the descriptive benefit that business model and business model templates offer us. They help us to describe our businesses so that we have on one visual or one canvas or one template an overview of what is going on. And I think that is extremely valuable. But what is often missing is why are we doing this? So what is the purpose? And for-profit organizations, especially those that are still adherent to the Chicago School, the business of business is making money. And yes, that is still very, very important, and that is not going to go away, because in order to finance activities, however beneficial they are for the rest of mankind, there needs to be some inflow of money that exceeds the costs we have to pay for these activities. So still, I want to ask the question, why in the center of the business model? Because it is going to be central also for how we design new business model with AI. So let me go one step further and ask you in a second poll about your company. and your business model change. So then let me close the poll and share the results as they are. That is quite interesting and quite clear that a substitution, the old out and the new in, is quite important for some of you, but the majority seems to go for a more gradual approach, especially the evolution one. Many of you have engaged in business model change, and many of you are engaging in this as we speak. So you're not engaging in this as a big bang, but you're engaging in this as a process, which makes a lot of sense. So I find the business model canvas idea quite interesting, and I've pulled up an example here from Clariant. And Clariant is, as you know, a firm in Switzerland that is one of the leaders in several markets that are related to pharmaceutical chemicals and so on. And here you see the full-fledged picture. But what I want to highlight here in the simple picture is they have inputs and outputs, and they emphasize the triple P, the triple bottom line, so planet, people, and performance. So why are we doing this? I asked before. So in recent years, we have seen performance beyond profit becoming very, very important constraints on which strategies we might want to choose over others. And this, I think, is an important development that we need to address when we speak about how AI helps us innovate our business models. Okay, so I'd like to move on from this Clariant example that shows that companies as large and leading in the industries as Clariant have started to embrace the why component of the business model to a greater extent. And I think that that is helpful. So the dominant business model changes, we said, started with the Industrial Revolution and went then to marketing and distribution. We had that, but you may be too young. You may remember how exciting it was to buy e-toys and so on online during the first internet bubble. Internet and e-commerce since then has shown its mettle, and even after the bubble, strong firms like Amazon have gone from strength to strength, really. And this is continuing, of course, like the other older models that are still around. And we have entered, again, with Amazon as a prime example, into an area where data-driven customer obsession is an option. With all the purchases that you do online, with all the readings that you do online, the newspapers really know what you like to read, and Amazon knows what you like to read. Netflix knows what you like to see, and Disney, when you go onto the park and you have the bracelet that allows them to track you a little bit, then that shows what your favorite path through the park is, and they benefit in that sense from knowing what your preferences are and playing to them in a way that was never possible to that extent. And that's kind of interesting. But we are now, I think, addressing together in this webinar a topic that is absolutely key. So we talk about AI, and many people say this is artificial intelligence, but you could also say this is all-purpose intelligence. And so the hype is massive. The hype around this concept is massive. And I think breaking it down to something that is more reasonable and practical, is in order. And for that reason, I've focused on the term prediction with many others. And this is a way where we can use AI to drive customer obsession one step further, where we use AI to almost generate something as artificial empathy that allows us to really be with how the user, consumer, client feels, so that we can offer them just in time what they were starting to articulate as a need, a want, a desire. So this is, I think, where we are now. Once again, the business models that you see there stacked up, they are still in existence as we speak. There are many, many firms that still very successfully make and sell Ferrari, market and distribute, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, and so on. So there are many, many firms that continue to do well with existing business models. But the big question is, are they not losing out on tremendous opportunities that innovating business models with AI could offer them? Right. So we just move on to the last bit. I have to apologize. It's a bit somber, this slide with all this black in the background, but I hope you forgive me for this time. So AI will overtake even empathy and imagination. Let me just go and see the chat here in full. Well, I wanted to, with gestures, illustrate what I mean with empathy. Thank you, Bogdan. Obviously, it would then be artificial empathy, and the empathy may not be at 100% level of correctness and reliability, but whose empathy is at 100% level of correctness and reliability? Even people's empathy for each other often doesn't amount to very much. So, but yes, I think that is an interesting, direction into which we are going. And just recently in the New York Times, there was a commentary on AI is conquering our faces. So what that basically means is AI will be very, very good at reading how we feel. And I think that is the first step to helping us feel better. Or it could be a step down the slope, making people feel worse so that they are moved to some action. But I'll come to that in a second. So yes, that's great. Claim powered by empathy. I'm not saying that we can claim this yet. I think that we are going into that direction. And yes, Jenny, I think you're totally right in saying these are only patterns. So the beauty of human emotion and consciousness lies in that no one really knows what's inside. So all that we as humans can do when we empathize is pick up all these clues and connect them with all these patterns that we have learned over all these years to figure out how might this person that we are speaking to feel just now. And so we are a machine that tries to make sense of what the emotional state of another person in front of us is, if you want to say so. And well, couldn't any machine do that too? I think there are some strides being made on this. New needs like imagination. Can AI create new needs like imagination, or can only recognize weak signals in existing data? I'm not so sure, Bogdan, whether I understand what you mean with needs like imagination. Certainly, it can produce novelty, and that novelty may strike us as irrelevant, relevant, intriguing, fascinating art. So there is some leeway for interpretation there. Let me just move on. I love the interaction. And I'll go back to the chat in a second again. Ivan, I fully agree. The real danger is that we stop thinking for ourselves. But did you see my presentation before putting this into the chat? I'm going there. So give me a minute. Give me a minute. So, of course, AI is a massive market. I just picked this up recently. That was a couple of days ago, October 5, 7.8 billion by 2025. So this is a massive market. This is a massive opportunity. And this is only India. Of course, this is a huge subcontinent, but there is a massive amount of specific applications where AI is being tested. I think that right now we are in an era of that's close to the Cambrian explosion of variety in species. Every company, every function in a company is thinking about what could we do with AI? Does it matter for us? Does it could it help us to increase the operational effectiveness? And so there is a lot of experiments going on, and yes, many will fail. Many will fail, and I think that is that's the price to pay. That's the price to pay to find something that really works, that is useful and more generally applicable. But finding an application such as HR tech that helps us to better interview with less bias, focus on things that really matter, are important. And if they do the job, if they get the job done better than we've been doing it previously, that is wonderful. Good. So recruiting AI systems is, however, under fire because it's excluding specific, it's excluding workers, it's discriminating. So, and this is where we are with the chats here. Let me catch up. Where the boundaries of empathy are reached, because much of what is available right now is very biased, and it excludes workers for some reason or another, and very often that is not quite transparent. So people are being excluded from a pool. Noticing this takes an extra effort, and understanding why the system has excluded them is not always transparent. So figuring out how we can monitor the purposefulness, the usefulness of AI is a very important topic. But before we go into the potential externalities, the unwanted externalities, let us go and explore a little bit what AI can do for new business models. But before that, let me plunge into the chat. So empathy for individuals' personal benefit versus manipulation. Norbert, this is a very important point. What are we doing this for? Why are we doing this? Are we doing this for only our purpose, or are we really helping the customer? You will all have seen the Washington Post and the Facebook files. So it is by now clear that social media, through the continuous comparison of self with other selves, increases stress and but also the feeling of being unwell, bordering depression. So there are some things that can and need our attention in order to improve things. Good. Being monitored, being controlled. That is a very interesting. So the question, Norbert, what is going to happen with our freedom once systems can predict many things that we might like or might not like, is a very important question. Yes, Hank, there is no empathy. That's why I said in quotation marks, I agree with you. There is only correlation, not even causality. Um, most of today's AI is quite poor and should be called artificial stupidity. Exactly. Yes. How many of the suggestions that you are being made are really make sense? When you have watched one movie, do you want to continuously watch the same kind of movies forever? If you have bought that kind of music or that kind of concert, do they really assume that you want to go and listen to the same performer over and over and over again? So yes, much of this is on the way, I think, and it's not there yet. Absolutely. So. Okay, right. So let me just, in Moscow, all metro stations are implementing face recognition for payment. Yes, that is interesting. That is a very interesting development. Anton, can AI kill, steal, or lie? What universal ethics are applicable? I'll come to that. I think that's really, really good. The ethical implications always, yes, should be a key metrics. When Nico, I fully agree with you, and you're taking the butter of my bread or the burger out of my burger, the meat out of my burger. Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes. There are proven algorithms to prove causal. Yeah. Are there proven algorithms to prove causal relationships? Well, the causal inference isn't so important for machine learning and AI. If you have found something that is very, very strongly correlated with a desired outcome, then the pragmatists say, well, that's good enough. I don't really understand the process behind that. As scientists and researchers, of course, we want to really understand what's driving what. And that is, I think, still very, very important, especially if we want to understand whether the AI does the job the way we want it to do its job. How can a 1950s marketing distribution business model company jump to 2020? Oriana, thank you very much for this question that allows me to use you as an excuse to move on. No, I think this is a great question. So how can we start transforming our business model so that we make use of AI without going full bombast and say we throw out the old and start over all new? That certainly is possible if you establish a separate organization or so, but we want to understand how we can pragmatically move from where we are today to an AI-enabled business model, and that's exactly what I would like to do. Very, very good. All right. Thanks. I love, Ivan, that's very nice of you that you are responding to Oriana. Do this. I think this is absolutely fantastic. Good. So another poll. I hope that you will appreciate that I want to get to know more of you and your company and your state with AI. So the poll is one question long with a couple of choices. And let me end the poll and show who you are with on this webinar. And I think it's quite interesting to see that many of you are very interested in AI. So we want to figure out what is in it for us. Does that make sense for us? And this is what I want to do for the remainder of the time that we have. And then some of you are discussing how to use it. So you're at the moment of decision making on where to use it, in what way. And then we use AI in parts of our value chain. And that's a very interesting answer. Can I have a couple of chat responses where you briefly share with the others where you use AI in which part of the value chain? It may be that not all of you are willing to share, but it would be very, very kind of you to share this with the fellow webinarists. So who's going to take the first plunge? Claims management, very nice. In assurance, quality of sales calls in the product, predict behavior of consumers, AI as automation of accounts payable, dealing with predictions. Absolutely, Roger, yes. Forecasting, insurance claims settlement, product development, new product development, yes. Trading, advertising, quality control, very, very interesting. So when we hear that one firm uses AI, that doesn't mean much for us. We need to go into depth and understand where and how they use it. Diagnostics, imaging equipment, part of us functioning. Yes, it's part of your DNA almost. Digital twins, emergency response systems, predictive maintenance. Vahid, that's very, very interesting. Customer service, all across our value streams. We also develop for others. Yes. Hotline chatbot. Yes, absolutely. Supply chain, predictive productivity. So it's interesting to see that this AI is really all purpose, apparently. But when it is applied to different purposes, it takes very, very different shapes and forms. So it's a bit like electricity. I'm using electricity to display this, the slides. I'm using electricity to keep the lights on here. And so it is taking very, very different shapes and forms. And that's absolutely great. Good. So let me move on then. And talk a little bit to the uses of AI. I think most of you who have responded, we are already using this, are very, very familiar with what is coming now. It's about answering questions. AI can help us with describing things easily. So how many people drive through a city at what time in the day? And why did it happen? So what causes a traffic jam is an interesting way of understanding how to improve life in the city. But the diagnostics is not so key to AI, because if we have correlations, then we can already predict without understanding why. That something might be happening again very soon, and we might want to do something about this. And this is highly interesting. But I think from a researcher's perspective, and also from a business perspective, it is better to know why things happen rather than being hung up with correlations only. However, the correlations that work, and pragmatically, it's hard to argue with them. But we need to find the snags where there's a bias, and so on. Prescriptive, how to influence. That's the next step. So absolutely, Nikhil, very, very good point. Predictive. So who is going to do what, when, how, with who, for how long? Absolutely, absolutely. And the beauty of digitally enabled communication is that much of this is available now. Thanks a lot, Andy. Sorry that you have to leave. Prescriptive. So this is the next step where we then influence. And if we go into a topic that is a bit divisive here and there, who has been vaccinated and who hasn't? So that's descriptive. Why do people vaccinate and don't vaccinate? That is trying to understand the reasons. What will happen? Well, those not vaccinated are more likely to see a hospital soon. And prescriptive. Now, how can we make people take the vaccination? That would be then how to influence. And this is exactly the question that I forgot who said it. My apologies for this, but that's exactly where the question of free choice comes in. So if we have identified courses of actions, to what extent should we be descriptive and leave freedom of choice? And the way companies answer this is going to be extremely important for their future success. Good. So what is this all about? Fundamentally, fundamentally, when we develop business models and we try to use AI, we need to focus on the outcomes first. So prediction quality, let's say prediction quality is very, very important element in the AI trend, movement, sea change that we are experiencing. And what that means is we are able to get to outcomes faster and better. How does that work? It works by taking the right actions. Taking the right actions to achieve the goal that we want to achieve. And in order to take the right actions, we need to make choices. And these choices are not always easy because there's much data available, there's too little data available, people agree, disagree, and this is where AI helps. It makes predictions. So Patrick has bought so many books of this, or Patrick has bought so many trips to that destination. That helps the system to give likelihoods about whether or not I'm going to buy a similar book or book a similar trip again sometime in the future. So the prediction, the ability to generate predictions is the key benefit that I want to focus on. AI generates predictions for us, and this is why we want to think about it. It helps generate predictions that are based on data. And that's kind of helpful. It's no longer only assumptions made up. It's based on data. And the predictions allow us then to choose the action that is most likely to lead to a better outcome. And that is what is driving the enthusiasm about AI. So data, of course, is key, and it comes in different forms. We need to have data to train the system, of course, so that it makes predictions. We need to have the input to make the prediction while it is happening online. And then we also need data to get feedback and twist and tweak, make the predictions better. And fascinatingly, AI is able now to do this on its own. So we all know that masters at Go were tranced by AI that basically picked up the art of playing Go by itself. It wasn't instructed any rules in the guidelines, just the basic stuff. It wasn't instructed to read dozens of histories of how grandmasters beat each other. It was just given the basic instructions, and then it learned by itself through a relentless and extremely fast iteration of operations. So this is what is interesting about AI. And I want to bring this to the business model idea and show how AI can help lead to better outcomes. So feedback generated through the outcomes, feedback on the actions and on the predictions help us, even feedback on the quality of the data can help us to improve the prediction accuracy and the reliability, and that is really a lot. And what can we do with this? I have a couple of questions, but I also need to watch time. It's so good to be with you. You know, it's just slipping through my hands. Preventive maintenance, yes, okay. Demonstrating causality is important to convince others. Fernandez, good point. Yes. Causation and correlation is at the core of the issue. Yes. Cannot identify customer needs and trends. AI is just a tool to find solutions. I agree. It's about how we use this tool, and that is. Let me take Andre's suggestion. So it was Ivan's suggestion, and move on with this. Absolutely, combining statistics and AI, yes, and that is possibly a way to cover correlation and also explain why it is happening. Interesting. Claude, very, very nice. Yes, so it is predicting a very, very likely outcome, and it's inherently repetitive. Yes, but I'm very repetitive. So I drink a lot of coffee at certain times in the day. When I get up, I have breakfast, and the variation is wide, but it's also predictable. So yes, there is a lot of repetition in our lives, and that is interesting, picking this up and making something with this. Okay, let me just move on. New business models with AI. What would this be? What could this mean? I think one of the great examples is Stitch Fix. If you have not heard about it, Stitch Fix is an online retailer who gets your data, your sizes, your demographics, and knows what kind of merchandise it has, and then sends you a set of things that seem to fit your profile and the answers to your questions that you have given them. And when you don't like what they've sent you, you send them back, and that is used as feedback. So the more you are engaging with Stitch Fix, the more they get to know that you like jeans or don't like jeans, that you like blue or brown. And so they send you things that are more along the lines of what you like. And then they throw in some oddballs to keep it interesting. So it's a massively successful business, and it's clearly that subscriptions to a system like that are beneficial. So it's important that they build up a record of what your preferences are. Claude, they want to know that you are Claude, and that you like certain things. Ivan, for you, they like to know that there are other things, and so they want to have a track record with you. That's clearly the case. But what is fascinating is just recently Stitch Fix has opened up. So they are opening up freestyle, and that means that even without a subscription, you can now start using Stitch Fix. And they very quickly, only after a purchase, they already give you recommendation that allow you to find the looks that you are after, complete the look of which you have bought an item. So you can buy other things that fit the shoes or the skirt or the shirt that you've bought. They help you with finding categories that are trendy, as trendy, or even more trendy than the category that you've bought. They allow you repeat purchases. I have friends who say, well, I always buy the same things, it's just in different colors. Well, they automatize this. You can do repeat purchases, pull it up, and just order it in another color. Free shippings, returns. So why is this interesting that they go beyond subscription? It seems that they now are confident enough and have enough data of people who are like you, so that when you start interacting with them for the first time, they already have many people who are similar to you, and based on that, they may offer you something that immediately hits the spot and gets you hooked. So it's a very, very interesting business model, especially the fact that they are now going off subscription, and the recent results were just astonishing. The share price had a big jump. So a very, very interesting business model that keeps on evolving and shows us the power of AI. Good. So prediction, quality, getting to outcomes. So we know that this works, but we want to make sure that we get outcomes reliably. And for that, this picture that we already saw is not enough. We want to make sure that someone figures out that the system is biased. Or we want to figure out, we want to have someone who has judgment, that understands that certain interactions become addictive. If they hit the dopamine button too often, they become addictive. So that judgment then asks for understanding also of what the values are of the company. Why are you doing this? Of the society you're in. Is this permissible? And I think these two elements, judgment and the values, are very, very important so that we can improve the prediction quality so that we get the outcomes that our company can stand for proudly, and that our society gets the service that it needs from us. So I think we are ready to move on and look a little bit into how I think we can use AI to innovate parts of the business models. Parts, because it's essential that we start somewhere. We cannot do this big bang easily. And trying to plan for a big bang is such an exhausting exercise that it very often gets stuck. So better start with one corner of the business model. And that's what we are doing right now. So what we are going to do is we go through this and see what AI can do for each of the segments. We want this. We want to make sure that AI helps us to improve the different segments of the business model. We want AI to help us with identifying the market segments or the product market areas that we might want to go into. We want AI to help us with finding what value we could propose to customers to create delight. We want AI to help us. What are the revenue streams that are permissible and allow us to capture most value? Good. So I think why we do this, that is more to be determined by values and judgments of leaders in our organization and society. So getting to outcomes, finding new and better areas. What does that mean? Well, it means that we need to use data to make predictions about which industries are more interesting than others. And that is in strategy an old hat. Which countries are more promising than others? Finding out which segments are more promising than others, finding out which products are more promising than others. And AI can make predictions based on data available. The challenge for you as business people is that we need to specify what questions to ask. So not just, hey, AI, tell me what product I should produce. That's too generic. You have to have specific ideas so that AI can say whether this choice is better or worse than that choice. Good. Similarly, we want to find new and better effects. We create value by generating effects for people. We create something that has a specific function. A tea kettle that gives out an alert, a sound when the water is ready. A car that is free of any exhausts, hydrogen, for example. And we can have effects that are more on the emotional level. Oh, this is attractive. This is nice. This is appealing. Or this is fitting with the style in my interior. And we can have things symbolic. How many of you drive a car and enjoy the number of heads that turn when you drove past? Right. So the symbolic meaning of products and services is important. If you're flying first class, then that is, of course, a great functionality. It gives you great emotional comfort, but it also has some symbolic status, some value, some prestige. And we can use AI to help us with making the right choices on what kind of effects to accomplish. I don't know whether you have noticed that the Economist has just picked up Shein. Shein is an online retailer again in the fashion space. They're eclipsing Zara in the US apparently, and they're very, very good at using digital technology and AI to figure out what is trendy, and they scrape this from the internet. So they're online, and they don't have to deal with so much of retail space and how to keep that productive. So a very, very interesting example of how they have figured out that hot items at extremely low prices can trigger people to purchase more. Of course, there is the big question behind such a business model, whether it is sustainable to make people buy and implicitly not use these products for a long time. Good. One other thing that is quite interesting is AI may be good at getting, finding out what jobs it leaves for human beings. So you may be familiar with the Roomba, that is a cleaning robot that cleans up. And apparently it was for some users a big problem that it didn't recognize dog poop. How many of you have a dog? Good, yes. So if you have a dog and a cleaning robot, say both. Yes, Loic, that's the good thing. Poops in the garden, that's very, very good. That's how it should be. So if you have both, have you encountered the problem? No, okay, very, very good. I think it's unpalatable, I understand that. But it's interesting to see that what effects you are accomplishing for the user is something that you can test and find out with AI. So capturing value, you can try to do something with the margin. You can figure out with AI what gives you an opportunity to raise prices or lower costs in ways that are still acceptable for users. You can test different ways of ownership or different models of ownership. Do you still have to sell the thing? Do you have to sell the car, the apartment, or are people happy to share the usage? Sharing economy, you had that. Then access. Who are you giving access to what? So are you giving access to your users, to third parties, and receive a payment from that? How sensitive will this be with your users if you were openly declare this? And how inappropriate would that be if you would not make that transparent? So AI can help with predictions to make the right choices there. Of course, we still need the judgment and a reflection on the values that we as companies want to offer and the values that society asks us for. So there are a couple of examples that highlight how different revenue streams, more or less implicit, have led to stellar successes through SPAC IPOs and IPOs and so on. But they also hide the dark side of what it could potentially mean. If you do this only to maximize profit without considering what you are doing to others in society, then this may be a very, very short-lived business model that you're developing, because you will lose the legitimacy. People will no longer allow you to do the things that you have been doing if they are considered harmful for society or for your user segment. So I want to close on time, which is already impossible. Let me just show you one final slide after this. In strategy, Rick Ramelt has written a good book, a great book on good strategy, bad strategy. I think what we together need to accomplish, and what my colleagues here at the IMD are working on, is figuring out what the good business models are that we, together with you and AI, can generate. And the final slide I have to share with you is the one where John Ive talks at the 10th anniversary of Steve Jobs' death about how important it is to become distinctive through values and good judgment. So I think that is where we can succeed, by bringing together and harmonizing the power of AI through predictions with the insight and concern and compassion that human beings have for each other. Thank you very much for being with me, even 2 minutes longer than you bargained for. Thanks a lot. And I hope to see you very soon here in Lausanne again. Have a great afternoon, have a great night, or a wonderful day ahead of you. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Bye now.